bring in our good buddy, Steve Palazzolo, the co-host of Pro Football Focus NFL podcast. Now that Brady has announced his retirement, how do you put his numbers into perspective here or quantify them?
Yeah, I mean, our data at PFF only goes back to 2006, so we missed the first few seasons of Brady's career. But since 2006, we've graded every player on every play in the NFL. He's the number one graded quarterback during that time. He's number one in our wins above replacement metric by far. That's the same metric. He was number one this past year. We had him as the most valuable player in the NFL, and I was actually I tweeted that out yesterday. Maybe a little confusing the way I tweeted it, but he's the most valuable player since the start of 2021, since the start of 2020, since the start of 2018, the Patrick Mahomes era. So I think that's one way to quantify Brady's greatness. No matter which year you pick, he's the most valuable player since that point using our WAR metric, despite having Aaron Rodgers and Patrick Mahomes and Drew Brees and Peyton Manning and all the other great quarterbacks that have come and gone or are still around in the NFL right now. So,
but what do you factor in on naming him MVP?
Yeah, so for us, it's evaluating every single play, right? So we go through each play, and if Brady makes a great throw and it's dropped, we're going to give him credit for that properly, right? So it's isolating his play from everyone else's. And when you do that back to 2006, he's our highest graded, he's our most valuable. And then in this particular season, where I think Aaron Rodgers probably ends up winning the MVP, we did have Brady graded higher and more valuable because a lot of those hidden plays went Brady's way, where Aaron Rodgers had a little bit more luck in those, in a few other areas where Brady didn't, particularly say like interceptions.
Brady's best year and worst year were what?
Yeah, it's tough to argue with 2007 as his best year. I honestly think 2016 was his best year. So he's coming off the Deflategate deal. As far as throwing the football and pure PFF grade, that was his best year from start to finish. They end up winning the Super Bowl, of course, against the Falcons. Worst year, 2013, 2019, the 2 years where I think if you look back at, the weapons and what was happening in New England at that time, it was also the two worst supporting casts that Brady's had. But I think 2013 and 2019 are the 2 years that stand out that clearly were not in line with the rest of Brady's career.
What quarterbacks are close to him in history?
I mean, just within the era, I think it was pretty clear. It was Brady, Peyton, Brees, and Rodgers as that elite tier. But it is fascinating that Brady's even been able to, separate himself from that group. Of course, from a winning standpoint, he was always compared to Joe Montana, his idol. There was a lot of elements to their game that was similar, right? The underdog mentality and always finding a way to win and all the Super Bowls and all that stuff. So, I think Brady clearly established himself as the best quarterback of all time. But when you go back and if you're even trying to debate, you're looking at a Peyton Manning, a Joe Montana, and then within the era, adding Rodgers and Brees to that.
I was also looking back at 2019. I think he threw 24 touchdown passes for New England. They were moving on. He was moving on. Like, did New England do the right thing statistically of moving on from Brady, looking at what he did that season?
Yeah, it's a tough one because I don't think their roster was just absolutely in shambles. They were coming off of 3 horrible years drafting. There's QB stats are mostly driven by the QB, but very strongly driven by the supporting cast as well, by how many, good receivers you have that get open. And obviously Brady benefited a little bit from going to Tampa Bay with great guys to throw to. But it's interesting because our numbers weren't as bad as, say, the raw numbers, right? So a lot of QB metrics had him 25th or 20th in the league that particular year. We had him 12th. So we were saying, look, he's still playing way better than the stats would show. So if you do put him into a better situation, he could perform. And I don't even think New England was equipped to build that right situation for him in 2020, given, their cap limitations and, the fact that they hadn't drafted well in a few years.
How would you quantify Stafford's years in Detroit? Like, how good a quarterback was he for a bad team?
Yeah, I always describe Stafford as a guy, if you watch him the right 3 games, he looks incredible. I mean, there's 3 games a year, right, that he just looks unbelievable. And he's streaky too. He's feeling it. And you saw this a little bit this year. He's no-look passes and he's just making incredible plays, but the consistency was never there. My early prediction with him coming to the Rams is that I think McVay would get the best out of him. maybe have a career year. He's just getting to that career year from a PFF grade standpoint. He just jumped over his career mark over these last few games, but the production is through the roof. So I think Stafford's always been a good quarterback. I've always thought of him as the 10th or 11th best quarterback of his era here, which has been a pretty good, era of quarterbacks, which is a good quarterback, right? And again, if you put him in the right situation, which apparently he is right now with the Rams, you can get a lot of production out of him.
I'll ask you the same question I asked Carson Palmer. You can have Matthew Stafford or Joe Burrow. One game.
I think, yeah. So one game's interesting because I think Stafford's ceiling, like that high end, is incredible. I do think Burrow's a better quarterback overall, right? The youth factor and what he's going to be going forward. The one game element of it, though, Stafford can do some special stuff, right? You also saw him throw it to a safety there, but Burrow made those. He had a couple bad decisions in the fourth quarter as well. So one game, it's closer, but overall, I'll take Joe Burrow. I don't want to overuse the it factor thing, but there's an element to this, right? Going back to Brady really quick, right? There are still Brady detractors out there. There's a few of them, right, who are like, oh, he had a bad game here. He had a bad game there. We just saw Patrick Mahomes have a bad game, right? There are bad games out there, but what made Brady special is he always bounced back, whether within the game, the next season, he always bounced back. And I think Burrow has elements of that. Even when things aren't going great, you have that feeling Joe Burrow is going to bounce back. So give me Burrow.
How did you grade Jimmy Garoppolo this year?
It was not his finest season. He started off horrible. He was good.
Has he had a finest season?
Yeah, 2017, the 6 games that he played with the 49ers after he came over was probably the best stretch of play in his career. The funny thing about 2019, when they went to the Super Bowl, I said we had Brady 12th that year. Garoppolo was 13th in our grading that year, but he had that Kyle Shanahan system. So the stats were really good, plus the playmakers that they've had there. So Garoppolo's been a top half of the NFL quarterback. And I think he was, say, week 7 through 18 or whatever during the regular season. But yeah, this playoff run was not good. If it did coincide with his thumb injury, it did look like he was having trouble with his accuracy. Maybe that was a factor, but Garoppolo was a mid-tier at best type of quarterback with high-end production, in part because of that system.
Who were the worst quarterbacks grade-wise this year?
It was all the rookies. Zach Wilson really struggled and Trevor Lawrence really struggled. Justin Fields came out of it a little bit toward the end, but those were the bottom end guys. Baker Mayfield was down there among the worst starting quarterbacks in the NFL. So
Mac Jones?
No, not Mac, not all the rookies. Mac was good. Mac was mid-tier to high end as far as he didn't have as much on his plate as far as what the Patriots asked him to do in most games, but he was accurate, generally a good decision maker. Mac Jones by far the best of the rookies, but the other high-end rookies, Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, those guys struggled a bit.
Do you simulate the Super Bowl results at Pro Football Focus?
I haven't. We do have an analytics team that works through that. I'm not sure what their results are at the moment, but we do have stuff we've worked on.
Great to talk to you again, Steve. Thank you for joining us.
All right. Thanks, Dan.
Steve Palazzolo, co-host of Pro Football Focus NFL podcast. Yeah, we thought it would be interesting just to talk to him since they grade every single play, and that I don't think it was close for MVP, that Brady was the best quarterback this year.